Noah Cole had not walked into this building in 11 years. His father had built it. His father had died in it. And the woman running it had made very clear, 3 days ago, that she had no interest in discussing either of those facts. Rachel Hayes had been CEO of Cole Industries for 18 months. She had been groomed for it for 4 years before that. She had not been consulted about the heir's return. She had not needed to be. He had walked into her office without an appointment. She had looked up from her documents and said, "Mr. Cole." He had said, "Ms. Hayes." Neither of them had offered a hand. In the waiting area outside, his daughter Ava was drawing. She had already filled 2 pages. The receptionist, the lobby ceiling, and a man in a suit who had looked at her twice trying to figure out what she was doing there. He said, "I'm not here to take anything from you." She said, "That's what someone would say if they were." He looked at her for a moment. He said, "I'm here because my father's company is bleeding money through a deal he would never have signed. I think you know that." She said nothing for 4 seconds. 4 seconds was a long time for Rachel Hayes. He had just said something she had been thinking for 6 months and had not said aloud to anyone. That was going to be a problem. Noah Cole had left the company, left the city, left everything with the Cole name on it, when he was 23. His father had not stopped him. His father had handed him the leather notebook and said, "When you're ready to come back, you'll know what to do with this." Noah had taken the notebook and driven north and built something of his own, a small construction firm that worked on affordable housing projects and turned a careful profit and asked nothing from the Cole name. Ava's mother had left when Ava was 3, not because anything dramatic had happened, but because she had wanted a life that didn't involve staying, and Noah had not tried to prevent someone from knowing their own mind. He had raised Ava alone in the house on the edge of the city, which was modest and clean and full of her drawings, and she had turned out to be the most perceptive person he had ever met. The call had come from his father's solicitor 3 weeks after the funeral. His father had left the estate in trust, the company, the building, the portfolio, with Noah as the majority beneficiary. There was one condition. Noah had to attend a minimum of 4 board meetings per year and review any acquisition above $50 million. His father had written this clause himself, 6 months before he died. He had not told Noah about it. The Meridian acquisition had been signed 4 months before his father's death, close enough to the illness that Noah had questions about the circumstances. The deal acquired a property development portfolio worth $240 million at a price that valued it at $370 million of unexplained premium, signed by his father during a period when his medical records showed he had been on medication that affected cognitive function. Noah had noticed this on page 47. He doubted anyone else had looked at page 47. Ava had asked him, the night before they drove to the city, "Is Grandpa's company in trouble?" He had looked at her. He said, "Someone may have taken advantage of Grandpa when he was sick." She had closed her sketchbook. She said, "So, we're going to fix it." He said, "We're going to try." She opened her sketchbook again. She said, "Okay. I'll bring the good pencils." He had brought Ava because the alternative was leaving her with someone he didn't know in a city he'd been away from for 11 years. She had not complained. She had asked if the building had good light for drawing. He said he didn't know. She had packed 2 sketchbooks, which suggested she was optimistic. Rachel Hayes had joined Cole Industries as a strategic analyst at 24, straight from a graduate program that had produced 4 of the company's last 6 senior appointments. She had been promoted 3 times in 4 years. When Arthur Cole's illness had become serious, he had called her into his office and said, "When I'm gone, the company needs someone who knows every number in every room. That's you." She had not cried until she was in the car park. Rachel had known about the premium on the Meridian deal since the week it closed. She had flagged it to the board, in writing, with a precise 3-page analysis, and had been told by the board's chairman that Arthur Cole had reviewed and approved the valuation personally and that the matter was not to be revisited. She had filed the analysis. She had not forgotten about it. The board of Cole Industries had been appointed during Arthur Cole's tenure and owed their positions to relationships that predated Rachel's arrival by 15 years. They had accepted her as CEO because Arthur had insisted, and because she was extremely good at the job, and because they had privately calculated that a young woman without family connection to the company would be easier to manage than an experienced male successor. They had miscalculated this consistently for 18 months. Noah had spent 4 days in the hotel room before going to the building. He had read every public filing, every board minute his solicitor could obtain, every analyst report on the Meridian acquisition. What he found, buried in the corporate structure of the Meridian portfolio, was a holding company registered in a jurisdiction with minimal disclosure requirements and registered 18 months before the acquisition. The timing meant someone had structured the deal before his father had agreed to it. His father had not initiated this. Ava had filled the third sketchbook on day 3. She had drawn the hotel room, the street below, the man at the reception desk who had a specific way of tilting his head when answering the phone. On page 12 she had drawn her father's desk from behind, the documents, the laptop, the leather notebook, and labeled it, Dad's work. He had found it when she was asleep and stood looking at it for a long time. The director of the holding company was a man named Gerald Fitch. Gerald Fitch was also a non-executive director on Coal Industries Board. He had voted in favor of the Meridian acquisition. He had not disclosed his interest in the acquiring entity. Noah photographed the screen, closed the laptop, and picked up the phone to call his solicitor. The call lasted 11 minutes. When it was done, he sat in the chair and looked at the ceiling for a while. His father had been sold a bad deal by someone sitting in his own boardroom. Before they left the hotel, he had crouched down and told her, "Today might be complicated." She had said, "Complicated how?" He said, "There are people at the company who did something wrong to Grandpa, and they don't know I know." She had thought about this with complete seriousness. Then, "Do you need me to be quiet?" He said, "Just be yourself." She said, "That means yes." Noah had called ahead for the second meeting. He had asked for Rachel only, no board members, no legal team, no assistants. She had agreed after 20 seconds of silence, which he had counted. When he walked in, he had placed one document on the table, the corporate registration of the Meridian Holding Company, with Gerald Fitch's name circled. She had looked at it for a long time before she looked back up at him. She had read the registration document twice. She said, "When did you find this?" He said, "4 days ago." She said, "I flagged the premium to the board 6 months ago." He said, "I know. I read your analysis." She looked up. He said, "Page 47 of the audit file. You're thorough." Something shifted in her expression, not softness, recalibration. She had known something was wrong with the Meridian deal from the day it closed. She had filed the concern and been told to drop it, and had dropped it, not because she believed it was resolved, but because she had calculated that she could not fight the board and run the company simultaneously, and that running the company was the thing Arthur Cole had needed her to do. She had made the right calculation. She had not been comfortable with it. He laid it out for her in 20 minutes. The holding company structure. The registration timing. Fitch's undisclosed directorship. His father's medical records from the month the deal was signed. He had obtained them through the estate. The cognitive impact of the medication. The specific window in which the deal had been presented and signed, which fell exactly within that window. He said, "My father didn't agree to this deal. He was managed into it." She said, "If we take this to the board, Fitch will have time to prepare a response." He said, "We don't take it to the board." She said, "Then where?" He said, "We take it to the Financial Conduct Authority directly, with the full documentation package. Simultaneously, we convene an emergency shareholder meeting, majority shareholder motion. You have board authority to call it." "I have majority." She looked at him. She said, "You've done this before." He said, "I've built things on difficult ground before. Same skill set." Ava had been in Rachel's assistant's office for an hour. She had drawn a portrait of the assistant, given it to her, drawn the view from the window, and was now working on something more complex that she wouldn't explain. When the assistant had offered her a biscuit, she had said, "Thank you. Is the woman in the big office nice?" The assistant had said, "She's fair." Ava had said, "That's better than nice," and gone back to drawing. Rachel had made the call to the Financial Conduct Authority at 4:15 that afternoon. She had prepared a precise summary statement, 3 paragraphs, no editorial, every fact sourced. She had read it to the intake officer, provided the reference numbers, and confirmed that the full documentation package would be filed within 48 hours. When she put the phone down, she looked at the document on her desk for a moment. Then she picked up her coffee, which was cold, and drank it anyway, because some moments require a gesture. At the end of the day, she had said, "Your father talked about you." He had said, "What did he say?" She said, "He said you were the one person in the company who had never wanted anything from it, which was why you were the only person he trusted completely." Noah had been quiet for a moment. He said, "He never told me that." She said, "I know. I think he was waiting for the right moment." He said, "There wasn't enough time." She said, "No." She looked at the city. "There rarely is." In the lobby, Ava had pointed at the ceiling and said, "I drew that. The light fixture. It looks like a jellyfish if you look at it a certain way." He had looked. He said, "I see it." She said, "Do you think they'd put it in the next building?" He said, "Put what?" She said, "The jellyfish light. If they build another building." He looked at her. He said, "We can ask." She said, "Good. I'll do a proper drawing for them." Gerald Fitch received notification of the FCA filing at 7:30 that evening via a contact he had inside the company's legal department. He had spent 12 years building the kind of relationships that meant information moved toward him before it moved anywhere else. This information had moved slightly faster than he had anticipated. He put the phone down and ordered another drink and began calculating his response options, which was what he always did and what had, until now, always been sufficient. Fitch had called Rachel at 8 o'clock. He had said the filing was premature and based on a misreading of the corporate structure. He had said he expected her to request a withdrawal before morning. She had said she would need him to put that request in writing. He had said that wasn't how these things were done. She had said, "I know. That's why I asked for it in writing." She had ended the call, sent Noah a one-line message, he called, and gone back to the documentation. He had replied, "Good. Document the call." He had then sat in the chair in the dark for a while, thinking not about Fitch. Fitch was a problem with a solution, but about his father. About the man who had been managed into signing something harmful during a month when he had not been able to trust his own mind. About whether Arthur Cole had known, somewhere in the diminishing clarity of those weeks, that something was wrong. He thought he probably had, and had not been able to do anything about it. Noah could. The emergency shareholder meeting had been called for a Thursday morning. Fitch's chair was empty. He had submitted a resignation the previous evening, which Rachel had received without comment and Noah had read with the specific satisfaction of someone watching a predicted outcome arrive on schedule. The resolution to unwind the Meridian acquisition had passed with a majority of 73%. The motion to appoint an independent director to the vacated seat had passed unanimously. After the room cleared, she had stood there for 4 minutes. She had been running this company for 18 months with a board that had known what Fitch had done and had chosen containment over correction. She had built the best company she could inside those constraints and had filed her concern in writing and kept the analysis and waited for the moment to move. The moment had arrived in the form of a man in a leather jacket who had walked in without an appointment. She was not someone who believed in luck. She believed in the conjunction of preparation and timing. A week after the shareholder meeting, Noah had brought Ava back to the building. She had looked up at it for a long time. Then she said, "Is it better now?" He said, "Getting there." She said, "Is the lady still in charge?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Good. I like her." He said, "You haven't met her." She said, "I talked to her assistant. She said the lady is fair." "I told you that's better than nice." He said, "You did." She said, "So yes. Good." They had met 3 more times in the week after the vote. Not about the Meridian unwinding, the solicitors were managing that. About the company, what it had been under Arthur Cole, and what it had become, and what it could become if the board was rebuilt correctly. Noah had said he had no interest in running it. Rachel had said she knew. He had said, "But I'd like to understand what my father built well enough to protect it." She had said, "That I can help with." She had taken him through every department in a single afternoon. He had said almost nothing. He had watched the way he always did. At the end he had said, "The people are good." She had said, "They're excellent. Your father chose well, and I've tried to keep choosing well." He said, "You've done more than keep. The infrastructure team, the 3 junior analysts, that's your hire?" She said, "6 months ago." He said, "They're the best people in the building." She said, "I know." He said, "So, do they?" She said, "Good." Ava had finally met Rachel in the corridor on the 3rd visit. She had shown her the drawing of the lobby ceiling, the jellyfish light. Rachel had looked at it for a long moment. She had said, "You see it differently from the way most people look at it." Ava said, "I draw what I see, not what I think I see." Rachel had looked at her with an expression that was not the expression she used in board meetings. She said, "That's an excellent principle." Ava said, "I know. Dad says it about other things too." He had spent an hour in his father's office alone before the building closed for the day. He had read the notebook, not all of it, the last section, which his father had written during the illness. The last entry, dated 6 weeks before his father died, was 2 sentences, "And will come back when he's needed." He always knew what the company was for, even when he left it. "That's why I never worried." She had shown him the drawing that evening. The building, the 2 figures outside, she had drawn them small but specific, navy dress and leather jacket. The jellyfish light at the top, glowing. At the bottom she had written in her careful printing, "Grandpa's building. We fixed it." He had sat with the drawing for a long time. She had watched him. She said, "Is it okay?" He said, "It's exactly right." She said, "I know. That's why I gave it to you instead of keeping it." Rachel had stayed late. She always stayed late. But tonight it was different. Not because there was work she was avoiding finishing, but because she wanted to be in the building when it was quiet and feel what it felt like now. Different from yesterday. Not fixed. The unwinding would take months. The new board appointment would take time. The work was not done. But the foundation was sound again. She could feel it. She had been waiting to feel it for 18 months. They left on a Friday morning. Ava had filled 4 sketchbooks. She had given drawings to the reception desk attendant, Rachel's assistant, one of the junior analysts who had admired her work, and Rachel. She had kept the drawing of the building. In the car she said, "Will we come back?" He said, "For the board meetings. 4 times a year." She said, "That's enough to finish the series." He said, "What series?" She said, "The building at different times of day. I need winter and spring still." He said, "Then we'll come back." Ava drew for the first 40 minutes of the drive. Then she closed the sketchbook, looked out the window, and said, "Dad." He said, "Yeah." She said, "I think Grandpa would have liked her." He said, "Rachel?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because she's fair." And she stayed. He looked at the road ahead. He said he would have. He did. She went back to the window. The city was gone now, and the road was long and clear, and there was no particular hurry.